It's official. Pastor Thomas Dixon is running for the United States Senate against Senator Tim Scott in November. In this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I speak exclusively with Thomas about his run for the United States Senate, Tent City, crimes in North Charleston, and tomorrow's anniversary of the one-year death of Walter Scott. Pastor Dixon.
How are we doing, sir?
I'm doing just great.
It's so good to see you.
Likewise.
Thank you for inviting me.
Anytime.
Yes.
The last time I saw you was a week ago.
Yeah?
Right outside the Saffron Bakery.
Mm-hmm.
You, Wendell Goodyard, and I believe William Hamilton and another lady were working on a homeless meeting because
Correct.
they were getting ready to go to Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
to talk about Tent City. But right before that, and before I taped the interview with Goodyard, I was asking you about how the fundraising was going for your campaign as far as filing.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, you didn't have much money to get to where you are now.
Exactly.
I'm wondering, what got you from not having enough to being a candidate?
Well, right now you're asking the question of Pastor Dixon, okay? Because Pastor Dixon walks by faith, not by sight. That's what my scriptures tell me I'm supposed to do. And so as disbelievers came up, as folks around me questioned, are you going to be able to do this? As the party I'm representing, I'm quite sure they were wondering in their minds, wow, he's not going to be able to do it. The media, their presentation of me was that I wasn't going to be able to get the money. I'm struggling. And I didn't let that cross my mind. I didn't let that, I just believed that if God had decided that this is where I'm supposed to be at, then he would make it happen. So apparently I'm supposed to be the Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate running against Tim Scott because the money was manifested. It was manifested in a way that 48 hours before the filing deadline we filed. And now I'm the only Democratic candidate on the docket running against Tim Scott. And we'll be victorious, according to that same faith, on November the 8th of 2016.
And tell me, as we sit here right now, when you went up to Columbia to file those papers and you put your John Hancock on that line, where were you emotionally?
That was, emotionally, it was huge for me, especially coming from the background I came from. I went from being an alcoholic drug addict, convict, whose life was more self-destructive and community destructive than I even can even perceive of right now, to being a viable candidate for the U.S. Senate. For me to sign that paperwork, for me to pay a check in the amount of $10,440, right, when the most I make right now on Social Security is $9,600 a year.
Yikes.
It was big. It was big. It showed me that the community will support me. It showed me that my God has opened up the door for me to be where I needed to be in order to help the people. And it also showed me that in the example that I give of success to not only those that are going through addictions or prison or whatever aspect, that there is hope. And for those who have never been there and have been judgmental of those people, to be able to look at a true success story.
Right.
I'm not an isolated incident. I'm not an anomaly. There are millions of other success stories that have come out of addictions and incarceration. But right now, I'm just the voice that's up front in order to let them know. Let's stop judging these people and let's look at them as viable members of our community.
And speaking of, supporting the community and, really things that are really big here in Charleston, let's talk about Tent City. Mm-hmm. As you know, April 9th will be a really historic day. Mm-hmm. A lot of those people will be actually moving out and moving into temporary locations. Mm-hmm. I know the media will be able to tour, I believe, a housing center in North Charleston tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, when you think about Tent City, what goes to your mind?
I understand Tent City. I understand Tent City from the perspective of at any time, could have actually been a part of Tent City. My job when I came out of prison, I came out of prison on work release. The work release camp is the same place where they're moving the Tent City people to on Leeds Avenue. That's where I came out of the prison system in 2001. But I came out with a job because it was work release, and I kept that job for 10 years. But in that 10th year, the last 4 years, I didn't receive any raises. It was a minimum wage job. I had gotten increases for the first 6 years. But for the last 4 years, there were no increases. So at $12 an hour, that was it. But I walked into my job one day because this is a right-to-work state.
Right.
And they just told me, we don't need you anymore. Wow. That's it. You're out. So fortunately, though, I have a wife who loves me, who was employed, and we have not, I've always had a roof over my head. But had she not been there or been supportive, then at that point I really had no way of finding employment, especially with this felony record, especially having to check that black box. That's why I understand the employment situation or the unemployment situation of ex-felons, how difficult it is for ex-felons to get jobs. And that's why I'm definitely going to be working to change that in this state. Other states have done it in order to give a person a chance to present themselves before being judged by a darn box. But I was one step away from that homeless position, really. But thank God for my wife and the solid foundation that she had. And for some reason or other, she loves me. I don't understand it, but I'm gonna thank God for that.
Right, yeah.
So the homeless situation, I understand that it's not a matter of a person wanting to be homeless.
Right.
It's a matter of circumstances and situations. Right. I mean, when I was released from my job because of this right to work state situation that my opponent stands in favor of, I had bills. I had a lot of bills. I had a whole lot of bills.
Yikes.
But my credit standing was good.
Okay.
I was in great standing as far as credit and everything. But when you just stop one day, you've got a job, and the next day you don't, and there's no reason behind it. Great evals, great credit, great everything. The next day it's all taken out from under you. How do you meet those bills? I applied for unemployment compensation. The company, by its own right, they challenged it. It took me 4 months and trips back and forth to Columbia with no money before Columbia deemed that I was wrongfully terminated and they gave me my back pay. But then again, the same party, this Republican Party, they took away the extensions on unemployment compensation. So whereas I could have at least gotten unemployment for a year, they knocked that back to 6 months. So I was able to maintain my bills and things like that for 6 months. But at the end of that time, when the money's just stopped, I'm filling out applications for jobs by the 20s and hundreds.
Right.
And everybody's looking at that little box, no doubt. I got 2 return calls. You know where I'm at right now. I'm not exactly stupid or anything like that. I mean, uneducated, let me put it that way. But I got 2 return calls for second interviews, and I got called back before I even got to those interviews saying that's all right, we fill the spot. So here I am, unemployed, no unemployment compensation because of this unemployed because of this crazy system we live in, no unemployment because of this crazy system that we're in, both due to the same party and their own selfishness as far as dealing with the people. And now I can't pay my bills, so here my credit rating is going down the tubes.
Yikes.
Down the tubes.
Wow.
So I got some issues that are unresolved, and as of yet, I've still not gone back to work.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but I'm gonna say by God's grace, that's allowed me to do the social justice work that's so needed to be done in the community also. It's opened up the door for me to really help people.
And speaking of which, let's stay in North Charleston because they need a lot of help. I mean, there's been a wave of crimes, I believe, from March 23rd up until like Wednesday night, where the guy actually ran his car into a building and ultimately died. And I know Mayor Keith Summey basically said that this guy had issues because of the criminal justice system. Dorothy Williams, a North Charleston City Councilwoman, basically says, hey, the African American community needs to work together. And of course you have Elder Johnson, who's out there working vigorously to try to end crime. When you think of what goes on right now in North Charleston, what is the biggest thing that sticks out in your mind?
There's a few big things. Let me start with some of the root causes.
Okay.
Some of the root causes is that this is not a new situation in North Charleston. Okay. There might be an increase going on right now, but the causes of this problem are still in place and have been in place for a long time. The education situation, the economic opportunity situation, or lack thereof, should I say, the high drugs, high guns in the community, all of these things. These things have been in place for a long time. These things have been in place for at least the 19 years that Dorothy Williams has been in office. These things have been in place for at least the length of Mayor Summey's term. Okay. So neither one of them have the option to be judgmental about what's going on right now, because neither one of them did a darn thing to stop it. And both of them had the opportunity to do it. I see those. Both of them had the opportunity to do something about it, but what they did was they focused everywhere else on their own issues, on what they wanted to do, and they neglected certain portions and pockets of our community. Wow. That and because, and this is pure speculation on my behalf and my own personal opinion, they did it because certain people are expendable in our society. The poor, the underprivileged, the uneducated, those who they point fingers at and say they don't want to be anything. But I'm here to say that those people do want to be something, but when you choose willingly not to invest in those communities and the future of those communities are destined to fail. And that's exactly what the people that we just mentioned, that I just mentioned, Mayor Summey, Dorothy Williams, there's a few more councilmen that are still seated that are just as big a part of the problem as the people are today that are perpetrating these things. They had a chance to make those communities better a long time ago, and they refused to do it. So they got no reason to point fingers at anybody. And particularly the Wayland area. My team with the coalition, we went in there several years ago, right after a double homicide happened within 12 hours in 2 different locations. We went in to try to help that community. Dorothy Williams, as the council person there, she did nothing but talk bad about us being in the community. We were just there to help. We didn't ask for any money. We didn't ask for anything. But for some reason or other, she just felt like she hated what we were there. We were there for and stand for it. And openly talked down about it, and openly was belligerent toward our presence there. Openly. So I don't understand a person like that who says that they're, first off, they're elected by the citizenry, but they're not serving the citizens, especially when it comes to bloodshed. If we don't do everything that we can within our powers to stop people from dying, then we're the most wretched on earth. We are the most wretched on earth. And that's all that we went in to do, was to help people stop dying. She never helped us along in one bit.
And you know, when I interviewed Doc Scott on Friday morning, on my lunch break at work, she basically said that if Dorothy's not a part of the solution, she's a part of the problem.
Yes.
When you hear that, what do you say?
I agree, wholeheartedly. And I saw where she, people commented on it on Facebook and everything, and all the likes and everything, and she's a great person and everything. Well, I'm trying to figure out when the real Dorothy Williams is going to stand up. See, Dorothy Williams, she works for Mayor Summey. She's not just a council person, but she's part of the Summey group that works for Mayor Summey. And that's why the areas of her district have gone down the tubes the way that they are, and they have been slated for redevelopment. I'm going to put it that way, redevelopment, so that we can get rid of the lower income residents that are there, redevelop this area, and move better paying, better economically stable people in. Basically moving the lower income people, the people of color that are there, out and opening it up. And one of the best ways that they can do that is to just allow the community to implode upon itself. Let's not put any money into that community. Let's keep the drugs going in there. Let's keep the guns going in there. Let's keep them at war against each other, because ultimately it's going to run people away from there. We'll be able to buy up the property cheap, redevelop that property, and then sell it high. She's a part of the problem.
And another problem that North Charleston is still dealing with is Walter Scott. Tomorrow will be the 1-year anniversary since his passing, and the controversy that happened thereafter. What plays back in your mind when you think of that particular day?
Wow, that was a day that I'll never forget. I was at a forum actually at College of Charleston right here, with Senator Kempson, and right in the middle of it, my phone went off saying that there had been a shooting. I ignored it the first 2 times because I was inside of this forum. Right. But the 3rd time it went off, I had to take it. I said, something's wrong. Something's wrong. And I looked at it and I said, there's a man has been shot in North Charleston by a police officer. And I excused myself from the meeting. I said, I got to go. I told him why I had to leave. Right. And myself and Smurf, we headed up to Remount Road, and this is what we encountered, was the shooting there.
On a Saturday morning?
On a Saturday morning, April 4th, 2015. Right. 1 year ago tomorrow. Wow. And that event is one of those watershed moments in my life and in the life of the Low Country, I believe, because of how it all played out. having arrived on the scene myself, maybe about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours at the most after it actually happened. Elder Johnson was on scene already.
Okay.
But of course, we couldn't get close to the actual crime scene. So from our vantage point, though, there was a lot of law enforcement activity and everything. The only thing that we knew was that there had been an officer-involved shooting, and that the person involved was, I think they said that he was deceased at that time. I'm not exactly sure. I can't recall whether that was the word that they used at that time.
Wow.
But later on, we did find out that he had died and that it was Walter Scott. And the scenario was about the tussling over the taser, and he was shot during the scuffle and all of this. And this was the scenario that was actually put out that day. It was put out the next day. But later on the next day, because we called for a press conference. We called for a press conference that Sunday. And the press conference was to basically let the community know, first off, we're active and we're engaged in this. We're on top of this. And to let City Hall, law enforcement in City Hall know that we are watching and that we are not going to allow any kind of mistreatment or misinvestigation of this situation as has happened in the past. And also to inform the solicitor's office that we are on top of this also, because we have a history within the state and in these areas of not prosecuting law enforcement officers who shoot African American males. It's just a fact here. So we wanted to let them know through that press conference that yes, the Watchdog Committee is assembled, and we're going to be on top of this to make sure that everything is done decently and order and legally. At the same time, we were hearing word came around about a video.
Right.
About a video. And I hadn't seen the video. As a matter of fact, I actually didn't see the video until after it was released. But we all know it's more or less history now. 3 days later, that video was released. That video said exactly the opposite of what the story was being spun, not only by the officer, but the rest of law enforcement. It's turned that whole thing around, and Officer Michael Slager was terminated from his position and then arrested. As an officer, and he was arrested, terminated by the mayor or whomever, the chief. When it comes to that, they have no credit. They cannot take any credit for what they did. The mayor, people pat the mayor on the back. I'll never pat him on the back for doing that, because had he not terminated Slager, in the light of that video, what was he going to do? Well, he really didn't do it. We have questions about whether he shot him in the back. No, it's about the tussle. He said that we're tussling. He couldn't say any of those things. He had to terminate him. Anytime, because of the video. Anytime that a person does what they have to, what they're forced to do, you get no credit for that. The thing would have been, and I'm not a law enforcement officer, I'm not a forensics investigator or anything like that, but the thing would have been for when the original officer, Officer Havisham, arrived on scene, and then others arrived on scene, especially the forensic investigators came on scene. When they stopped and they looked at the crime scene the way it was laid out, you have Officer Slager's shells on the ground here in one position, 15 to 20 yards away, or whatever the distance was, you'll see Walter Scott's body. That tells me that there might have been some shooting as Walter Scott was trying to get away from the situation. And that in itself says that there might be something wrong here. Just the thought about it. The shells are right here, the body's over there. How did that happen? Let's look at the wounds. The wounds seem to be like in his back. Let's stop and think about this. Mike Slager, Officer Slager, look, here's what I need you to do. I need you to surrender your weapon right now. I need you to turn around. I'm going to cuff you. I'm going to put you in the back of this car right now while we investigate this scene thoroughly. But instead, they said, oh, great job, Mike. We're going to let you go home. As a matter of fact, we're not even going to take a statement right now. We're going to let you go on home. You can come back in tomorrow. So this cop who just killed this man, knowingly killed this man, went home that day, had dinner as usual, slept with his wife that night as usual, got up the next day, went into his job as usual, might have stopped and brought donuts for everybody as usual, knowing that he killed somebody now. Look at how smoothly he did it. If you look at the video, this was smooth. As soon as Walter Scott broke away from him, first off, if he was in a struggle with Walter Scott and Walter Scott got the best of him, Slater should have turned and run. That would have been the right thing to do. If this guy got the best of him, knowing that he didn't have no weapon, Slater should have ran. But instead, Walter Scott took off running. We see this officer of the law, sworn to uphold and protect our people, serve and protect our people, smoothly just assume the stance, smoothly take his pistol out of his holster, level that pistol, take aim, and squeeze off 8 shots at a fleeing man. At the back of a fleeing man with no weapon. He knew he didn't have a weapon. That's a murderer. That's a sociopath. That's a psychopath. And then goes on about business as usual for the next 3 days. Business as usual.
Until the video.
Until the video. Sir. If there was no video right now, he'd be a happy camper, having killed a man. Who does that? Anytime that we have that type of mentality floating around in our police department, and he's not alone. Now, I'm going to say, okay, he's also not the majority of law enforcement officers that I know. But for the people that came upon that scene, and without them saying something does not fit right here, let's detain Officer Slater until we put the pieces together, every one of them is just as guilty as him for pulling that trigger. He pulled the trigger, and every one of them, as far as I'm concerned, they're guilty for collusion, for being a part of that same problem.
And you know, when this is I guess a week ago, 2 weeks ago, when right after the day I did the interview window, as you know, Reggie Burgess apologized for the Walter Scott incident. So when you heard that, what did that tell you?
He told me that he got caught up in his emotions, and he spoke what he wasn't supposed to think. Now, these are all my opinions, okay, that I'm stressing in this video, in this interview, are all my opinions. But I really do believe, and I wasn't there that night, I did see some other clips, and he got sort of caught up in his emotions and let something slip out that he wasn't supposed to. I posted it on Facebook when I shared the article. Man ain't gonna be happy about this. I don't know what we'll never know what the aftermath of that was, but I don't really believe that was what he was supposed to say.
Okay.
But he just got caught up in his emotions, running off at the mouth, and said something that I'm quite sure that City Hall later on probably had a conversation with him over.
Okay.
My opinions.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Yeah.
I cannot support that with any kind of fact.
Okay.
Okay?
All righty. Well, Pastor Thomas Dixon, it's always good talking to you. Thank you so much.
And you also, sir.
I appreciate this.
Thank you, Quintin. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Quintin's close up.